What if a briefcase full of money changed your life, but not the way you think? In the heart of Accra, a humble Uber driver returns what isn't his and unlocks a spiritual war he never signed up for. Dark ritual, vanished mansions and miracles that defy reason. This is a Ghanaian thriller unlike anything you've seen. If you're hooked already for stories that stir your soul, subscribe, like, comment, and share now. Because this isn't just fiction. It's a warning. The rain fell hard that evening in Accra. Heavy drops lashed against the cracked windshield of Kwabina's Toyota Corolla, its wipers squeaking tiredly with each pass. The old engine rattled beneath the hood, struggling to stay alive. Kwabina adjusted the volume knob and let the worship music fill the cabin. "You are Alpha and Omega," the voice soothed him, if only slightly. He stole a glance at the dashboard. Fuel was low. Again. He sighed and muttered, "Lord, I need just one good trip today." Kwabina was 34 and worn down. Life had been a fight, especially lately. He had once dreamed of running a garage, of building cars from scratch, of traveling outside Ghana. But dreams cost money, and right now, even buying yam for supper felt like luxury. Abina, his wife, had called him earlier. The children were asking for bread, and they had run out of cooking gas. She didn't complain. She never did. But the silence on the line had said everything. He drove through East Legon, scanning for a request. Then, ping. A pickup nearby. He tapped the screen. He turned the corner and slowed to a stop outside a tall hedge and silver gate. From the shadows, a man emerged. Tall. Clean-cut. Dressed in a black tailored suit. Dark glasses hid his eyes, even though the sun had already set. He moved like someone used to commanding silence. Without a word, he opened the back door and entered. "Good evening, boss," Kwabina offered. No reply. The man simply tapped his phone and said, "Villaggio Vista." Kwabina nodded and shifted into gear. As they drove, the man never spoke again. The only sound was the soft patter of rain and the low hum of worship music from the front speakers. At one point, the man tilted his head slightly, as if listening to the lyrics. He said nothing. Just tapped his fingers slowly on the leather briefcase beside him. When they reached Villaggio Vista, the man handed over payment in cash, no tip, no thanks, and stepped out with practiced precision. But in his rush, the briefcase remained on the seat. Kwabina didn't notice it at first. He was too busy watching the red taillights vanish behind the gate. He exhaled slowly and pulled away, already thinking about getting home. 10 minutes later, stopped under a flickering street lamp near Shishi, something caught his eye. The briefcase. His heart skipped. He reached back and pulled it into the front seat. It was heavy. Leather. Real. No tags. No logos. Just elegant and expensive looking. He hesitated, then slowly opened it. Inside, bundles of US dollars. Neatly stacked. Hundreds. 50s. A few 20s. Band wrapped. Kwabina blinked and looked around, as if someone might accuse him just for seeing it. His fingers hovered over the bills. The money looked fresh. Crisp. Untouched. He counted 2 stacks. Then 3. Then stopped. It was too much. He closed the briefcase, hands trembling. His breathing quickened. His mind raced. He had debts. Rent was overdue. His car needed brakes. The kids hadn't had meat in weeks. This could change everything. But something deep in his spirit twisted. He pulled over, turned off the engine, and sat in silence. For nearly an hour. Then he drove home. That night, Kwabina couldn't sleep. The briefcase sat on the floor beside the bed like a demon with no face. Abina noticed his silence. "You didn't eat," she said softly. "I'm not hungry." He told her nothing. "Not yet. He needed clarity. When the sky turned gray with dawn, Kwabena rose, washed his face, and knelt beside the small table in the living room. He placed his hand on his worn Bible and prayed. Father, I'm not perfect. But I know what's right. If this is a test, help me pass it. He reached for the briefcase again, not with excitement, but with purpose. Inside it, tucked between two stacks of bills, was a business card. Nana Kofi Sarpong, CEO, Sarpong Industries. He had heard the name before. Everyone had. Sarpong was Ghana's youngest tech billionaire, a man whispered about in business circles. His company had contracts across West Africa. His face had been on TV. Kwabena took the card, changed into a clean shirt, and headed out. By 8 a.m., he was outside the tall glass gate of Sarpong Industries, just off Independence Avenue. Two guards approached his battered car. You lost? One of them asked, eyes scanning the dented bumper. I'm here to return something, Kwabena said. He held up the briefcase and business card. The guard's expression changed. He took the card, studied it, and called someone on his walkie-talkie. A minute later, the gate opened. Go straight. Park by the fountain, the guard said. Kwabena did as told, feeling painfully out of place. Men in suits walked past him, talking into earpieces. Women in heels glanced at him, then looked away. The receptionist smiled politely but asked no questions. She simply said, "He's expecting you," and led him upstairs. The elevator doors opened into a massive glass office with a view of the Accra skyline. The scent of imported leather and cologne filled the air. There, behind a desk of polished wood, stood the man from last night. The passenger. Now without glasses. He turned and smiled. Kwabena. I was beginning to wonder if I'd see you again. Kwabena placed the briefcase on the table. You left this. I did, Sarpong said. And you brought it back. He opened the case, scanned the contents, and then shut it. Slowly. You'd be shocked how many men would have kept this, Sarpong said. But not you. Kwabena stayed silent. Sarpong stepped forward and extended his hand. I'm Nana Kofi Sarpong. Kwabena hesitated, then shook it. I want to thank you, Sarpong continued. Not with cash. Anyone can throw money. But with something meaningful. He walked over to a shelf, pulled out a black envelope, and handed it over. Inside was a silver-embossed card. You are cordially invited to a private dinner at the Aburi estate. Just a small gathering, Sarpong said. I'd like to celebrate a man of integrity. Kwabena felt torn. His instincts pulled in opposite directions. But the man in front of him seemed genuine. Generous. Polished. He smiled politely and nodded. Thank you, sir. As he left the office, a strange chill ran down his spine. That evening, precisely at 6 p.m., another sleek black car arrived at Kwabena's gate. The driver wore black gloves and didn't say a word. Kwabena kissed Abena on the forehead and told her he'd be back by night. As the car pulled away and the sun began to sink behind the hills of Accra, Kwabena looked out the window, thinking of how strange life could be. One honest choice had brought him into the orbit of a billionaire. But what he didn't know was that this dinner was no celebration. It was a setup. And by the time the car climbed the winding roads toward the dark forest of Aburi, fate had already shut the door behind him. The SUV was too quiet. Kwabena sat stiffly in the back seat, barely leaning into the plush leather. The vehicle smelled of new upholstery, cologne, and something faintly synthetic, like plastic masks and sealed boxes. Outside, the darkness pressed hard against the tinted windows as they left the city behind. The driver hadn't spoken since they left East Legon. Now, 30 minutes in, he reached into the glove box and pulled out a black silk blindfold. For security, he said flatly, without meeting Kwabena's eyes. Kwabena frowned. Security? What kind? Instructions, sir. The man's voice had a finality to it. Kwabena hesitated. He was a cautious man by nature. But something about Sarpong's invitation, his words, his gaze, had unsettled and intrigued him both. And so, with a shaky breath, he accepted the blindfold. The world turned black. He sat back, heart thudding as the car purred up winding roads. The silence inside was thick, broken only by the occasional shift in gear and the muffled crunch of tires on gravel. Time seemed to stretch. Were they in the hills? Near the forest? Every turn twisted deeper into uncertainty. At one point, Kwabena was sure he heard water, a stream, maybe. Then nothing. Minutes blurred. Or hours. Finally, the engine stopped. The driver removed the blindfold gently, like someone peeling gauze off a wound. Kwabena blinked. The scene before him felt pulled from a dream. Or a warning. A mansion stood tall and brooding against a fog-drenched backdrop. Its stone walls were old, hand-cut, with faint carvings, symbols, maybe a dinkra, maybe something older, etched around the archways. Heavy shutters covered the windows, all of them shut tight. Orange lanterns flickered at intervals, casting strange shadows that danced like spirits across the courtyard. The air was unseasonably cold for August in Ghana. Mist curled along the ground, slithering through Kwabena's shoes like searching fingers. He turned quickly. The SUV was gone. No tire tracks. No road. No driver. Only the woods and the stone path beneath his feet. He checked his phone. Full battery. Zero signal. No Wi-Fi. Not even GPS. He was alone. As if on cue, the massive oak doors creaked open. Two men stood there, tall and silent, wearing brown hooded robes. Their faces were dark, unreadable. They said nothing. Only gestured inward. Kwabena stepped inside. The air shifted. It smelled of herbs, burnt sage, perhaps, but layered under that was something metallic, sharp. Like iron. Like blood. The hallway was dim, lit only by candles. Their flames danced in glass jars placed along the walls. Tapestries hung from high ceilings, but the patterns were strange, geometric, ancient, repeating eyes and concentric circles. His footsteps echoed. No voices. No laughter. No music. Only the ticking of a massive wall clock. A woman emerged from the shadows. She was young, barefoot, dressed in a long white gown. Her hair was braided tight to her scalp, and her eyes never met his. She led him to a candlelit table set for one. On a silver plate, roasted meat, black rice, and a steaming bowl of dark red soup. "Thank you," Kwabena said softly. She didn't respond. She didn't even glance at him. Instead, she stood behind his chair, facing the wall. Unmoving. He picked up a fork and cut into the meat. It smelled sweet, but the texture was odd. Chewy. Tough. Something inside him recoiled. He took only 2 bites, then pushed the plate away. "Please, where's Mr. Sarpong?" he asked. No answer. The only sound was the ticking. Moments later, one of the robed men appeared again and gestured. Kwabena followed him up a narrow staircase. The guest room was large but windowless. Thick curtains hung where windows should have been, but behind them, only brick. No air passed through. The door locked from the outside. He sat on the bed, an old frame, firm mattress, and looked up. The ceiling bore markings in charcoal. Circles. Lines. And dozens of eyes. Open, unblinking eyes. Drawn in perfect symmetry. He stood and tried the door. Locked. Later, the silence broke. Drums. Soft at first, then louder. Rhythmic. Not musical. More like a pulse. Or a summons. The beat crawled into his chest and stayed there, throbbing. He rushed to the curtains, yanked them back, and pressed his face to the small hole in the brick. Outside, at the edge of the woods, figures moved. Hooded. Slow. Purposeful. They carried something, long, heavy, wrapped in a dirty cloth. They vanished into the trees. Then. A scream. Distant. Female. Or maybe young. It stopped abruptly. Kwabena backed away from the wall. He grabbed his Bible from his duffel bag and dropped to his knees. "Heavenly Father," he whispered. But the words stuck. His throat tightened. He tried again. "I will fear no evil." The drums kept playing. That night, sleep came in shivers and fragments. And then. A dream. Or was it something more? Kwabena stood in the middle of a vast field, crackling with fire. Smoke rose in black columns. Shapes moved at the edge of the flames, tall, shadowy, whispering his name. In the center stood a figure. Glowing. Neither man nor angel. A silhouette wrapped in light, face obscured by brilliance. The voice was deep. Unshakable. "Do not be afraid, Kwabena. You carry fire." He gasped awake. His clothes were soaked in sweat, but the room was ice cold. His Bible lay open beside him, pages rustling though no breeze moved. And something had shifted in him. He stood. His limbs no longer trembled. Something unseen had anchored itself to his chest. He wasn't sure what, but it was strong. When he stepped out for breakfast, the mood had changed. The staff was no longer indifferent. They were anxious. Some avoided his eyes. Others stared too long. One servant, while pouring tea, dropped the kettle. "He's marked," the man muttered under his breath. Kwabena looked at his hands. Nothing had changed. But in the way people looked at him, something had. The woman in the white gown returned. This time, she whispered as she laid a folded towel on the table. "You must leave. Tonight, your soul will be weighed." Kwabena froze. "What?" he asked. But she had already backed away. Then. A hush. The tall doors creaked open. Sarpong entered. No longer in a suit. He wore long ceremonial robes, white with gold embroidery that shimmered with every step. His feet were bare. His smile was wider. But his eyes were colder. "Ah. Kwabena. The honored guest," he said. His voice echoed unnaturally. Kwabena stood. "Where am I? Why was I blindfolded?" Sarpong stepped forward, the silence stretching between each word. "You're at my family's ancestral estate. These hills are older than any map. Tonight is sacred. And you, Kwabena, you are the centerpiece." Kwabena clutched his Bible. "What do you mean by that?" Sarpong smiled wider, but there was no warmth in it. "That briefcase, it wasn't forgotten. It was placed. A test. A trap, if you like. We've been looking for someone uncorrupted. A soul without stain. You passed." Kwabena's heart pounded. "Passed for what?" "A vessel," Sarpong said. "We need one. The spirits are old. They require something rare. Someone pure. You." Kwabena stepped back. "I'm not part of this." "You already are." The servants began to close in. Candles flickered violently. The hallway dimmed. Kwabena clutched his Bible tighter and spoke, voice trembling. "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want." Sarpong's smile faded. His pupils narrowed. "You'll need more than scripture where you're going." The candles went out. The drumming resumed. Louder now. Closer. The ritual had begun. The air in the forest was thick with smoke and dread. Kwabena's hands were bound with black cords, and his feet dragged across the dirt path as four hooded men pulled him forward. Behind them, torches lit the narrow way. Their flames flickered violently, reacting not to wind, but to some unseen presence in the trees. Above the canopy, the blood moon hung full and low, casting a deep crimson light over the path. The sound of drums throbbed in the distance, slow, pulsing, ancient. Kwabena had stopped struggling. Not out of surrender, but out of focus. He gripped tightly to a single prayer in his heart. He whispered it again and again, his voice low, "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." They arrived at the shrine just before midnight. It was an open clearing, surrounded by standing stones carved with twisted symbols. At the center stood a towering altar, made of blackened rock and stained wood. Animal skulls hung from tree branches. An enormous statue loomed behind the altar, a creature with a serpent's body and 3 faces, each more terrifying than the last. The sons of Bia, cloaked in deep red robes, formed a wide circle. Around the clearing, other people lay motionless on the ground, men and women, young and old. Some twitched as if dreaming. Others were still. Their clothes were torn. Their eyes rolled back. They were sacrifices. Sarpong stepped forward, now fully transformed into the high priest of the ritual. His face was painted in black ash, and a crown of bones rested on his head. He held a golden dagger shaped like a serpent, humming with dark energy. "Sons of Bia," Sarpong announced, "tonight the blood moon crowns our journey. Tonight, we break the final gate." The crowd began chanting in a forgotten language, deep and guttural. The flames of the torches grew tall, rising unnaturally high. The drums grew louder. Kwabena was dragged to the altar and forced to his knees. 2 robed men pressed him down, and Sarpong raised the dagger. But the moment the blade touched Kwabena's chest, it shattered, splitting into 3 pieces. Gasps filled the air. The chant stopped. The drums ceased. The torches all died at once, plunging the shrine into darkness. Sarpong staggered back. What? Kwabena didn't wait. He began to pray aloud, louder than he ever had. His voice cracked, but he kept going. "Father in heaven, deliver me from evil. Let your light shine here. Let no weapon, no ritual, formed against me prosper." Suddenly, one of the high priests clutched his chest and dropped to the ground, convulsing. Another screamed and backed away from Kwabena. "He's covered in fire," the man shouted. "I see flames. Not of this world." Panic spread through the circle. Some fell to the ground. Others tried to run, but their feet slipped in the mud. A wind rose, cold, fast, furious. The trees around the shrine groaned and bent backward. Then the statue cracked. A long split ran down its middle, glowing white-hot from inside. The forest seemed to moan as if in pain. Sarpong, furious, screamed above the noise. "Continue the ritual. Hold him down." But no one moved. The power in the clearing had changed. It no longer belonged to the sons of Bia. Kwabena stood up. Unbound. The ropes had burned away. His eyes were full of light, not fire, but something brighter. He lifted his Bible high. "Let God arise, and let his enemies be scattered." A blinding white light burst from the altar. It engulfed the shrine, the circle, the trees. The screams of the cultists were drowned by a sound like thunder and rushing water. The serpent statue exploded. The altar cracked apart. The stones around the shrine fell inward. And Kwabena passed out, his body collapsing into the glowing dust as the light swallowed everything. Silence followed. Then darkness. Then nothing. But the fire had been lit. The morning was eerily silent when Kwabena opened his eyes. He lay face up on damp forest soil, rays of sunlight filtering weakly through the trees. His clothes were dirty but intact. His Bible rested beside him, its pages smeared with ash. His body ached, but not a single wound marked his skin. He slowly sat up. The air was thick with the smell of burnt earth. Around him, there was nothing but silence, no chanting, no torches, no statue, no altar. The shrine was gone. The clearing where the ritual took place had been reduced to blackened soil and scattered pieces of stone. Then he saw it. A few feet away, lying half buried in the dirt, was the briefcase. The same one that started everything. He picked it up with trembling hands and opened it. It was filled with charcoal. Not a single dollar. Just ash and soot, burnt, dead. Kwabena looked around again. The massive mansion vanished. No gate. No road. Only trees and smoke. He wandered in a daze for what felt like hours until he stumbled onto a narrow dirt path winding between the trees. With no clear direction, he followed it, his legs weak and slow. He walked under the hot sun, through low brush, past termite mounds and empty cocoa fields, until he reached a tiny village tucked between the hills. The villagers stopped and stared. He looked like a ghost, dust-covered, eyes wide, holding a burnt briefcase and a Bible. An old woman came forward. Her back was hunched, and her eyes were sharp like glass. Her name was Mama Efua. She studied him quietly. Then she whispered, "You are the one." Kwabena looked at her, confused. I was at a place, there was fire, and men in red. "I know," she said. "They took others before you. But none returned. Not alive. Not whole." She led him to her hut, offered him water, wrapped his feet in cloth. He sat by the fire as she prepared herbs. "You crossed into battle with ancient forces," she said. "And somehow, you returned. That is not man's doing. Heaven's mark is on you." Kwabena didn't speak. He couldn't. The weight of what happened clung to his bones. Mama Efua told him stories. Tales of powerful men in Ghana, CEOs, politicians, musicians, who disappeared after trying to bargain with ancient spirits. Men who rose quickly but vanished mysteriously. She spoke of forbidden pacts, rituals under the blood moon, names that people feared to say aloud. But none of them had ever been seen again. Until Kwabena. He stayed in the village for 2 days. Word spread quietly from house to house. He didn't tell them everything. Just that he'd survived something evil. The children avoided him at first. But one small girl who had been sick for weeks sat beside him one morning while he read from his Bible. By nightfall, her fever had broken. The next day, her mother knelt and begged him to pray for her son who couldn't walk. Kwabena was reluctant, he didn't see himself as a healer. But he prayed anyway. And the boy stood up. That night, several villagers reported dreams. Dreams of a man in white robes, holding a burning Bible, standing in front of a broken shrine. They all described the same man. It was Kwabena. He felt overwhelmed and scared, so he quietly left the village at dawn and began the long journey back to Accra. This time, on foot. When he reached the city, the world had already changed. The news was everywhere: Nana Kofi Sarpong, Ghana's billionaire tech CEO, missing without a trace. Reporters speculated wildly. Some said he fled the country. Others claimed he'd been involved in ritual activity. Investigations into Sarpong Industries revealed massive financial fraud, off-the-books transactions, and suspicious offshore activity. Several of his board members were arrested. His assets were frozen. Employees were left in chaos. But no one knew what truly happened. Kwabena didn't speak up. He didn't want fame. He didn't want recognition. He returned to his small home in Accra. Hugged his wife. Held his children tightly. He never told them everything, but they noticed the change in him. He was quieter now. More prayerful. He spent nights alone reading scripture, eyes often tearful without reason. Strange things started happening. The neighbor's baby, sick for months, recovered overnight after Kwabena prayed at the doorstep. A young mechanic said he saw Kwabena in a dream, standing in fire but not burning, saying only one sentence, "Come back to the light." People began showing up at his door. Quietly at first. The sick. The desperate. The broken. Some came just to see him. Others asked for prayer. And in many cases, healing followed. Kwabena didn't understand it fully. He didn't want it. He never asked for it. But deep down, he knew, the battle that began in the forest hadn't ended. It had only shifted. It had been 1 year since the night of the blood moon. Kwabena no longer drove Uber through the traffic-filled streets of Accra. He no longer waited by his rusted Toyota, praying for fares. Life had shifted in ways he never expected. He now lived and worked in Jamestown, in a quiet corner near the lighthouse, where old colonial buildings stood faded against the wind. He had opened a modest Christian center, a small white structure with cracked walls, a tin roof, and a wooden cross nailed above the entrance. He named it Refiner's Fire Ministry. He didn't call himself pastor, prophet, or reverend. He simply told people, "I'm a man who knows what fire feels like." Every day, people came. Not because of flashy flyers or TV ads, but through whispers. People told stories of a man who had been swallowed by darkness and returned burning with light. Mothers brought their children for healing. Addicts came, hoping to be free. Businessmen in silent crisis slipped in during lunch breaks just to sit in the back. Kwabena would pray. Some were healed. Some weren't. But all left changed. He still lived simply. His wife Abina cooked meals for the poor who visited. Their 2 children played barefoot on the steps of the center. In the evenings, Kwabena swept the floors himself, humming quiet hymns. But the nights were hardest. Because he knew, the fire hadn't finished burning. One Thursday evening, just after prayers ended and the last visitor had left, Kwabena locked the gate and stepped inside the office. He lit a single candle, sat by the desk, and opened his Bible. Then, 3 knocks. He paused. No one was outside the gate. No footsteps. Just silence. He opened the door. There was a package wrapped in brown paper. No name. No delivery man. Just sitting there, waiting. He stared at it. His hands trembled slightly. The paper felt warm. He took it inside, placed it on the desk, and unwrapped it slowly. It was the briefcase. The exact same one. The one filled with money. The one that had drawn him into the jaws of darkness. But now, it smelled of smoke. Burnt leather. Its edges were cracked, and ash fell out from the seams. Kwabena opened it carefully. Inside, there was no money. No dollars. Just ash. And a letter. He unfolded it. The handwriting was smooth. Elegant. Unmistakable. I underestimated you. We will meet again. NKS. Nana Kofi Sarpong. Kwabena read it twice. Then a third time. He didn't flinch. He didn't panic. He stood, slowly, and looked around the room. The single candle flickered violently. Then all the lights went out. Total darkness. For a few seconds, silence pressed down on the room like a weight. Then, whispers. Not from outside. Not from nearby. From inside the walls. From inside the air. Low, slithering voices. A cold wind blew through the closed windows, flipping the pages of his Bible, which now lay open on the desk. Kwabena reached for it. His fingers rested gently on the worn leather cover. He didn't speak loudly. He didn't shout. He simply said, "No weapon formed against me shall prosper." The room stilled. The air shifted. The candle relit on its own. And the Bible settled on Isaiah 54. He closed his eyes and began to pray, not out of fear, but out of authority. Father, I thank you for the fire. For the trials. For the war I didn't choose but was called to. Let your spirit stand guard over this place. Let every darkness sent against me return to the sender. Outside, the wind died down. But above the building, unseen to the natural eye, movement stirred in the spirit realm. Shadows recoiled. Chains snapped. And a ripple of power swept across the city. Somewhere in a mansion hidden deep within the eastern hills, a room of mirrors cracked simultaneously. In Accra, people across the city woke up from identical dreams, dreams of a man in white, holding a scorched briefcase in one hand and a flaming sword in the other. Some wept. Some trembled. Some repented. Others, those still aligned with the darkness, took note. Kwabina's name was now known. Not just by men. But by spirits. Both holy and unholy. As he knelt down on the floor, the final words of his prayer whispered into the night. The fire is ready. The camera zooms out slowly, showing the small Christian center glowing with candlelight. Then further, revealing the coastal skyline of Jamestown under a calm, dark sky. Then higher still, until the entire city of Accra is seen below, breathing, waiting, watching. The battle isn't over. But this time, heaven isn't silent.